Stand with me for a moment in the shadow of Baalbek's trilithon, where stones weighing over 1,000 tons rest as though placed by gentle hands. Feel the whisper of wind through Sacsayhuaman's impossible joints, where not even a knife blade can slip between blocks carved with precision that mocks our modern tools. Listen to the echo of flood stories told in 10,000 voices across every continent, each carrying the same terrible memory of waters that covered the world. These are not merely curiosities or coincidences. They are fragments of a shattered mirror, reflecting a history far stranger and more magnificent than our textbooks dare to admit. Tonight, we follow the evidence wherever it leads, through the realm of giants who moved mountains, through the memories of floods that remade the world, through the ruins of civilizations that vanished with their secrets intact. What if everything we thought we knew about our past is incomplete? If these mysteries pull at something deep within you, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also comment where you're from and what time you're watching. I love seeing our global community of seekers light up across the world as we explore these hidden chapters together. In the high desert of Peru, where the air is so thin that every breath becomes a conscious act, stands a wall that should not exist. Not according to our understanding of what pre-Columbian peoples could achieve with copper tools and fibre rope. The wall at Sacsayhuaman rises in 3 massive tiers, its foundation stones weighing as much as 300 tons each. They fit together with such precision that centuries of earthquakes have failed to shift them, while the Spanish colonial buildings nearby crumble with each tremor. The local Quechua people have a simple explanation, passed down through generations of careful remembrance. The giants built it, they say, matter-of-factly, as one might describe the weather, in the time before the sun, when the world was different. To the academic mind, this is folklore, a colourful story invented to explain the inexplicable. But what if it is something else entirely? What if it is testimony? The biblical account speaks of the Nephilim, described in Genesis as mighty men which were of old men of renown. The Book of Enoch, excluded from the canonical Bible but preserved in Ethiopian churches, expands on this narrative with unsettling detail. These beings, it claims, were the offspring of divine watchers and human women, giants who possessed knowledge of metallurgy, astronomy and construction techniques far beyond their time. They built cities, taught forbidden arts, and grew so numerous that they threatened to overwhelm the earth itself. Half a world away, Greek mythology tells of the Titans, beings of enormous stature who ruled before the gods of Olympus. They were associated with the megalithic stones found throughout the Mediterranean, the same massive blocks that modern archaeologists struggle to explain. The Greeks called them Cyclopean walls, attributing them to one-eyed giants who possessed supernatural strength. In this ancient understanding, moving 1,000-ton stones was not an engineering challenge but a simple demonstration of physical power. The Norse sagas speak of the Jotuns, mountain-sized beings who dwelled in realms beyond Midgard. These giants were not mindless monsters, but sophisticated entities with their own culture, knowledge, and cities built into the bones of mountains themselves. When Thor's hammer strikes were said to create thunder, it was often in battles against these giants, conflicts over territory and resources that echoed the very real struggles between different peoples and, perhaps, different species. In the Americas, the tradition continues with remarkable consistency. The Lakota speak of the Wazir, ice giants who once ruled the northern plains. The Cherokee remember the Nonahi, stone giants who could walk between worlds. The Paiute tell of the Sita-Ka, red-haired cannibals of enormous size who were finally driven to extinction in a great war. Most intriguingly, many of these accounts specify that the giants were not native to the Earth, but came from elsewhere, arriving in times of great cosmic upheaval. Physical evidence, though suppressed or dismissed, continues to surface. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, newspaper reports documented the discovery of human remains of exceptional size. Skeletons 7 to 12 feet in height, often found with cranial features suggesting a different evolutionary path than modern humans. Most of these finds were collected by the Smithsonian Institution, where they disappeared into storage vaults that researchers have been denied access to for decades. The most famous case involves G.A. Kincaid, an explorer who claimed to have discovered a vast underground city in the Grand Canyon in 1909. According to the Arizona Gazette, the Smithsonian funded an expedition to investigate Kincaid's claims. The artifacts allegedly recovered included weapons, tools, and mummified remains of beings significantly larger than average humans, with features that suggested Asian or possibly Egyptian origin. The Smithsonian has since denied any knowledge of this expedition, yet the caves Kincaid described remain off-limits to the public, protected by federal restrictions that seem disproportionate to their supposed emptiness. The question of weapons provides another intriguing thread. Medieval European chronicles describe swords and armour found in ancient battlefields that could only have been wielded by men of enormous size. These artifacts, when they survive in museum collections, tell a story of warfare conducted on a scale that dwarfs the conflicts between ordinary humans. The great sword of Pirgalof's Donia, a 16th-century Frisian warrior, measures 7 feet in length and weighs nearly 15 pounds. Historical accounts describe Donia as over 7 feet tall, yet even for a man of his stature, such a weapon would have been almost impossible to wield effectively. In the ancient Near East, archaeological sites continue to yield evidence of construction techniques that seem designed for beings of superhuman strength. The Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek contains foundation stones that weigh over 800 tons, moved from quarries nearly a mile away. The largest stone, known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighs an estimated 650 tons and was somehow lifted, transported and positioned with millimetre precision. Modern cranes capable of handling such weights are massive industrial installations that require prepared foundations and clear access routes. Yet these stones were moved across rough terrain and fitted into place with an accuracy that suggests not just strength, but sophisticated understanding of physics and engineering. The footprint evidence scattered across the globe presents perhaps the most direct testimony to the existence of giants. In Glen Rose, Texas, the Paluxy River has revealed footprints preserved in limestone that appear to show human feet of extraordinary size, some measuring over 20 inches in length. While skeptics argue these are misidentified dinosaur tracks or natural formations, the detailed toe impressions and pressure patterns suggest otherwise. Similar giant footprints have been documented in Australia, Africa and South America, often in geological strata that predate the accepted timeline of human habitation. The cranial anomalies found worldwide present another piece of the puzzle. The elongated skulls discovered in Paracas, Peru, possess cranial capacities up to 25% larger than modern humans. More puzzling still, mitochondrial DNA analysis has revealed genetic markers that do not match any known human population. These are not the result of artificial cranial binding, a practice known to various cultures, but appear to represent a distinct biological lineage. Similar elongated skulls have been found in Malta, Egypt, and Eastern Europe, suggesting a widespread population that shared distinctive physical characteristics. The architectural evidence extends far beyond mere size. The precision-fitted megaliths of Pumapunku in Bolivia were carved with such accuracy that they appear to have been machined rather than hand-carved. The angles are perfect, the surfaces smooth, and the interlocking joints so tight that they create structural integrity through pure geometric harmony. This level of precision requires not only advanced tools but sophisticated mathematical knowledge and engineering principles that supposedly developed millennia later. In Easter Island, the Moai statues present their own mystery. While their faces are famous, fewer people know that most of these statues have bodies that extend deep underground. Recent excavations have revealed torsos with intricate carvings and proportions that suggest the statues were meant to represent beings of enormous height. The logistics of carving, moving and erecting nearly 900 statues, some weighing over 80 tons, across the island remains unexplained by conventional archaeology. The Chinese historical records speak of the Shanhai Jing, or Classic of Mountains and Seas, which describes various races of giants that once populated different regions of ancient China. These accounts are typically dismissed as mythology, yet they contain geographical details that have proven accurate when cross-referenced with modern exploration. The descriptions of giant remains found in burial mounds align suspiciously well with the skeletal discoveries that continued to be made throughout Chinese history. Even in the historical period, accounts of giant humans persist with disturbing regularity. The Roman historian Josephus wrote of seeing the bones of giants displayed in Jerusalem, describing them as far larger than those of ordinary men. Medieval chronicles from across Europe document the discovery of oversized skeletons in ancient burial sites, often describing them as the remains of ancient heroes or biblical giants. The genetic aspect adds another layer of complexity. Modern humans carry DNA sequences that suggest interbreeding with at least 3 other hominin species: Neanderthals, Denisovans, and a mysterious third group that has left genetic traces but no fossil record. This phantom population, dubbed ghost DNA by researchers, suggests that our ancestors encountered and mated with beings whose physical remains have somehow disappeared from the archaeological record. Could these be the traces of the giants described in global mythology? The suppression of evidence creates its own pattern of proof. Museum storage facilities contain thousands of oversized human remains that are rarely displayed or studied. Academic careers are ended by serious investigation into giant remains. Archaeological sites are suddenly placed off limits when anomalous discoveries are made. This systematic dismissal suggests not scientific skepticism, but active concealment of data that contradicts established narratives. The implications extend beyond archaeology into the realm of human origins themselves. If giants once walked the earth, if they possessed advanced knowledge and capabilities, then our understanding of technological and cultural development requires fundamental revision. The megalithic structures worldwide might not represent the pinnacle of ancient human achievement, but the remnants of a lost golden age when beings of greater capability shaped the world to their will. As we examine the stone witnesses that surround us, from the Caribbean to the Caucasus, from the Americas to Asia, a pattern emerges that transcends cultural interpretation. These are not random myths or coincidental architectural achievements. They are evidence of a chapter in Earth's history that has been deliberately erased from our collective memory. The giants walked among us, built wonders that we can barely comprehend, and left behind traces of their presence in stone and bone and the deepest layers of human remembrance. The question is not whether giants existed, but what happened to them, and what their disappearance means for our own future. For if beings of such capability once thrived on this earth, what forces were sufficient to remove them from history itself? The precision haunts every serious observer, not the rough approximation one expects from ancient stonework, but tolerances measured in millimeters across blocks weighing hundreds of tons. At the Osirion in Abydos, Egypt, the granite blocks fit together with joints so tight that paper cannot slip between them. These are not the crude stacked stones of primitive builders, but the work of master craftsmen operating with tools and techniques that modern engineering struggles to replicate. Consider the challenge purely from a physics standpoint. Moving a 1,200-ton stone requires overcoming enormous static friction, controlling momentum across uneven terrain, and placing the final product with surgical precision. Our largest mobile cranes can handle roughly 1,000 tons under ideal conditions, flat, prepared surfaces with unlimited access. Yet at Baalbek, the trilithon stones were somehow lifted 30 feet into the air and positioned within a complex structure that left no room for modern construction equipment. The quarrying itself presents the first impossibility. The stone blocks at various megalithic sites show evidence of cutting techniques that slice through granite as though it were cheese. The edges are sharp, the surface is smooth, without the pounding marks or chipping characteristic of bronze or iron tools. Some cuts appear to have been made with extraordinary heat, vitrifying the stone surface in a way that suggests temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit applied with laser-like precision. At Pumapunku, the evidence becomes even more perplexing. The andesite blocks were shaped with compound curves and interlocking joints that require three-dimensional calculation to execute. The surfaces show tool marks consistent with diamond-tipped cutting implements. Yet the site predates any known civilization capable of such precision manufacturing. The blocks were clearly mass-produced using standardized templates, suggesting an industrial capacity that conventional archaeology places millennia in the future. The transportation problem multiplies the mystery. The trilithon stones at Baalbek were quarried nearly a mile from their final position. The route includes slopes, valleys, and terrain that would challenge modern heavy transport vehicles. Yet these massive blocks were moved without visible damage, maintaining their precise dimensions and smooth surfaces. No ramp systems or support structures have been found that could account for such transport capability. The lifting mechanisms defy conventional explanation. At Stonehenge, the horizontal lintels were raised 20 feet into the air and positioned across vertical trilithons with perfect accuracy. Each lintel is shaped with precise curves to accommodate the circular arrangement, requiring not just extraordinary lifting power, but sophisticated surveying and engineering knowledge. The joints between the vertical and horizontal stones use mortise and tenon connections typically seen in fine woodworking, scaled up to dimensions that would require giants to execute. The global distribution of these techniques suggests coordinated knowledge rather than independent development. From Peru to Lebanon, from Egypt to Cambodia, the same impossible precision appears across cultures that supposedly never interacted. The cutting techniques, the transportation methods, the assembly procedures all show remarkable consistency, despite being separated by oceans and millennia. Vitrification presents perhaps the most puzzling element. At sites across Scotland, Ireland, and Eastern Europe, ancient hill forts show evidence of intense heat that melted the stone walls into glass-like surfaces. Achieving such temperatures with conventional fires is impossible. The heat required exceeds 1 to 800 degrees Fahrenheit, sustainable only with advanced metallurgical furnaces or industrial-scale combustion systems. Yet these fortifications predate any known civilization capable of such thermal engineering. The jointing techniques reveal knowledge of stress distribution and seismic engineering that wasn't officially developed until the modern era. At Sacsayhuaman, the massive blocks interlock in 3 dimensions, creating structures that have withstood centuries of earthquakes while nearby Spanish colonial buildings crumble with each tremor. The engineers who designed these walls understood principles of flexible construction that allow the structure to move as a unit rather than breaking apart under seismic stress. Tool marks on the stones themselves tell a story of capabilities that transcend known historical technology. At Ollantaytambo in Peru, the andesite blocks show evidence of being scooped and molded like clay while maintaining their hardness and durability. The surfaces curve in ways that would require either heating the stone to malleability or using cutting tools that could shape the hardest materials with fluid motions. The assembly sequence reveals planning and coordination that suggests massive workforce organization. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the massive stone circles were erected according to a master plan that took generations to complete, yet maintained perfect alignment and proportional harmony across the entire complex. The project management required to coordinate such construction across centuries implies social organization and cultural continuity far more sophisticated than the hunter-gatherer societies supposedly responsible. Underground chambers add another layer of impossibility. Beneath many megalithic sites lie extensive tunnel systems carved through solid bedrock with the same precision as the surface structures. These subterranean networks often extend for miles, connecting distant sites through passages that maintain perfect gradients for drainage and ventilation. The scale of excavation required suggests mining capabilities that dwarf anything in the historical record. Water management systems integrated into megalithic sites demonstrate hydraulic engineering of extraordinary sophistication. The Maltese temples include underground chambers with channels that collect, store, and distribute water through precisely calculated gradients. The systems are still functional after thousands of years, showing no signs of the wear or maintenance issues that plague modern infrastructure. The acoustic properties of many megalithic structures suggest intentional engineering for sound amplification and resonance. At Newgrange in Ireland, the interior chamber naturally amplifies whispers while filtering out external noise. The mathematics required to design such acoustic spaces demands understanding of wave physics and harmonic principles that weren't officially developed until the modern era. Astronomical alignments add yet another dimension to the engineering puzzle. Not only were these massive stones moved and positioned with mechanical precision, but their placement follows celestial calculations that require advanced mathematical knowledge. The builders somehow coordinated earthwork on a massive scale, with sky observations of extraordinary accuracy, creating monuments that serve as both architectural marvels and astronomical computers. The preservation of these structures over millennia suggests building techniques superior to modern methods. While steel and concrete buildings deteriorate within decades, requiring constant maintenance and eventual replacement, megalithic structures have endured ice ages, earthquakes, and thousands of years of weathering with minimal degradation. The building methods incorporated principles of longevity that exceed contemporary engineering capabilities. Materials science evident in megalithic construction reveals knowledge of stone properties and treatment that remains mysterious. Some sites include stones that appear to have been hardened or treated with unknown processes, making them more durable than the surrounding bedrock. Chemical analysis has revealed surface modifications that cannot be explained by natural weathering or known historical techniques. The ergonomics of megalithic construction suggests builders of superhuman size and strength. The handholds carved into some massive blocks are spaced for fingers longer than human proportions would allow. The lifting points and manipulation features are positioned for being significantly taller and stronger than average humans, as though the stones were designed to be handled by giants. Scale relationships throughout megalithic sites consistently suggest builders larger than modern humans. Doorways, steps, and architectural proportions that would be awkward for people of average height become elegant and functional when scaled for beings 8 to 12 feet tall. The consistency of these proportions across different sites and cultures hints at a common origin or shared architectural tradition among giant builders. The timeline challenges become most apparent when considering the labor requirements. Conservative estimates suggest that moving and positioning the Baalbek Trilithon would require thousands of workers laboring for decades using any known historical techniques. Yet many megalithic sites show evidence of rapid construction, as though massive projects were completed in far less time than conventional methods would allow. Quality control across megalithic sites maintains standards that would challenge modern construction projects. Despite the enormous scale and complexity of these monuments, there are no visible mistakes, no areas where precision lapses or alignment fails. This consistency suggests not only advanced techniques but systematic quality assurance that prevented errors across projects lasting centuries. The integration of multiple engineering disciplines, structural, hydraulic, acoustic, astronomical, within single monuments demonstrates knowledge synthesis that didn't appear again until the Renaissance. The builders somehow mastered and coordinated expertise across fields that modern education treats as separate specializations. As we survey the global landscape of megalithic achievement, from the precisely fitted stones of Peru to the massive temples of Malta, from the dolmens of Europe to the moai of Easter Island, we see not primitive attempts at monumental construction, but evidence of capabilities that exceed our own. These are not crude efforts by ancient peoples working with stone tools and fibre rope. They are the accomplished works of master engineers who possessed knowledge and abilities that we have yet to recover. The architecture of the Titans stands before us, weathered by time but unbroken, challenging every assumption about human technological development and the linear progression of civilization. In their impossible precision, their superhuman scale, their integration of advanced engineering principles, these monuments whisper of a golden age when giants walked the earth and shaped it according to their will. They are invitations to remember what we have forgotten and to consider the possibility that we are not the first to reach such heights of achievement. In the beginning was the flood. Not as metaphor or allegory, but as the most traumatic collective memory burned into human consciousness across every continent, every culture, every linguistic family that has ever drawn breath on this earth. Over 500 flood myths survive in the ethnographic record, each carrying the same essential elements despite arising from peoples separated by oceans and millennia. This is not coincidence. This is testimony. The numbers themselves demand attention. 40 days and nights of rain appears in traditions from Mesopotamia to Minnesota, from the Amazon to Australia. The specificity is haunting. Not 30 days, not 50, but consistently 40, as though survivors across the globe were counting the same cosmic catastrophe. The flood heroes build arks or boats to precise dimensions that echo across cultures. The biblical Noah, the Sumerian Utnapishtim, the Hindu Manu, the Aztec Nata, the Greek Deucalion. Each receives divine warning, each preserves life through the deluge, each grounds their vessel on a mountain when the waters recede. The rainbow appears as a promise of renewal in traditions that never had contact with the biblical narrative. The dove returns with evidence of dry land in stories told from the Celtic lands to the Pacific Islands. 7 pairs of clean animals, the release of birds to test for land, the sacrifice of thanksgiving after survival. These details repeat with mechanical precision across cultures that developed in isolation. Such consistency cannot be explained by cultural diffusion alone. It speaks to witnesses recording the same events from different vantage points. The geological record increasingly supports what the myths have always claimed. Evidence of massive flooding events appears in sedimentary layers worldwide, often corresponding to the end of the last ice age approximately 12,800 years ago. The Younger Dryas period marked a sudden return to glacial conditions that lasted over 1,000 years, followed by equally rapid warming that released enormous volumes of meltwater into the world's oceans. Heinrich layers in ocean sediments reveal episodes of catastrophic ice discharge that dumped billions of tons of fresh water into the North Atlantic, disrupting ocean circulation patterns and triggering global climate chaos. These events created conditions that could easily account for the widespread flooding described in mythological traditions. The scale of water release would have been sufficient to raise sea levels by hundreds of feet, inundating coastal plains where most human populations lived. Lake Missoula presents a case study in catastrophic flooding that demonstrates the power of such events. When ice dams failed during the last glaciation, the lake emptied in a matter of days, releasing water volumes equivalent to the combined flow of all modern rivers. The resulting floods carved the channeled scablands of Washington state, moving boulders the size of houses and stripping topsoil down to bedrock across thousands of square miles. Similar megaflood evidence appears on every continent, suggesting coordinated or cascading failure of natural dams worldwide. Marine fossils found at high elevations provide direct evidence of oceanic flooding far beyond current sea levels. In the Himalayas, marine limestone containing seashells and coral formations exists at elevations exceeding 20,000 feet. While conventional geology attributes this to tectonic uplift over millions of years, the preservation of delicate organic structures suggests more rapid deposition under catastrophic conditions. The Black Sea deluge hypothesis offers another window into the reality of massive ancient flooding. Evidence suggests that around 7,600 years ago, rising Mediterranean waters breached the Bosphorus barrier and flooded the Black Sea basin with the force of 200 Niagara Falls. The inundation covered an area the size of Florida, destroying fertile lands where advanced civilizations may have thrived. Survivors of this catastrophe could well be the source of Middle Eastern flood traditions. Underwater archaeology continues to reveal evidence of human settlements submerged by rising seas. Off the coast of India, the sunken city of Dwarka shows sophisticated urban planning and construction techniques that suggest advanced civilization existed at sea levels far below current shorelines. Similar submerged ruins appear off Japan, the Mediterranean, and the Americas, indicating that rising waters claimed entire civilizations during the post-glacial flooding. The Sphinx water erosion evidence provides perhaps the most controversial support for catastrophic flooding in the historical period. Geologist Robert Schoch has demonstrated that the erosion patterns on the Sphinx and its enclosure are consistent with heavy rainfall rather than wind-blown sand. Since the Sahara has been arid for over 5,000 years, this suggests the monument was carved during a much earlier period, when the region experienced the kind of torrential precipitation described in flood myths. Ice core data from Greenland and Antarctica reveals rapid climate transitions that would have triggered massive hydrological disruptions. Temperature changes of 15-20 degrees Fahrenheit occurred within decades, accompanied by dramatic shifts in precipitation patterns. Such rapid climate change would have overwhelmed natural drainage systems and created the kind of sustained flooding described in mythological accounts. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis offers a mechanism for triggering global catastrophe. Evidence suggests that a comet or asteroid impact approximately 12,900 years ago initiated the climate disruptions that led to the Younger Dryas cooling period. The impact would have vaporized ice sheets, creating massive atmospheric disturbances and precipitation that could account for the 40 days and nights of rain remembered in flood traditions. Genetic bottleneck evidence in human populations supports the occurrence of near-extinction events approximately 70,000 and 12,000 years ago. These genetic constrictions suggest that human populations were reduced to small surviving groups, consistent with the flood narratives that describe only a few families surviving global catastrophe. The timing of the more recent bottleneck aligns closely with the end of the last ice age and the geological evidence for massive flooding. The preservation of flood memories across diverse cultures suggests that these were not localized events, but global catastrophes that affected all human populations. The similarity of details across isolated traditions indicates either a common origin for the stories or independent recording of the same planetary events. Given the geographic distribution of flood myths, a global origin seems most likely. Cultural memory studies demonstrate that traumatic events can be preserved in oral tradition with remarkable accuracy across centuries. The Aboriginal Australians maintained songlines that preserve geographical and historical information spanning over 40,000 years. If such precision is possible for general cultural memory, the consistency of flood narratives becomes even more significant as evidence of actual historical events. The role of mountains as landing sites for flood survivors appears in traditions worldwide. Mount Ararat in Turkey, Mount Parnassus in Greece, the peaks of the Andes, the hills of the American Southeast, all are remembered as refuges where humanity survived the deluge. The geographic distribution of these refuge sites suggests that flooding was indeed global in scope, requiring survivors everywhere to seek high ground. Astronomical alignments in flood chronologies point toward cosmic triggers for the catastrophe. Many traditions associate the Great Flood with specific celestial events, the alignment of planets, the passage of comets, or the precession of the equinoxes. These astronomical markers suggest that ancient peoples understood the flood as part of larger cosmic cycles, rather than random natural disasters. The Nephilim connection appears in many flood narratives, linking the catastrophe to the presence of giants on Earth. The Book of Enoch explicitly states that the flood was sent to cleanse the earth of the corruption introduced by these beings. Similar themes appear in Greek accounts of the flood that ended the Age of the Titans and in Native American traditions that describe the elimination of giant races through global catastrophe. Post-flood technology transfer appears in multiple traditions, suggesting that survivors carried advanced knowledge from the antediluvian world. The sudden appearance of agriculture, metallurgy, and monumental architecture in the archaeological record corresponds roughly with the end of the Younger Dryas period. This pattern suggests that flood survivors reintroduced sophisticated technologies rather than humanity developing them independently. The dispersal patterns described in flood myths align with genetic and linguistic evidence for human migration after the last ice age. The spreading of Noah's descendants in biblical tradition corresponds to the expansion of human populations from refuge areas as climate stabilized and sea level settled. Similar dispersal patterns appear in flood traditions worldwide, suggesting coordinated repopulation of areas devastated by the catastrophe. Sacred calendar systems in many cultures preserve numerical relationships that appear to encode flood chronologies. The Maya long count, Hindu yugas, and other cyclical calendars contain numerical patterns that correspond to astronomical cycles and geological transitions. These systems may preserve ancient knowledge of the cosmic cycles that trigger periodic catastrophes. The ark symbolism appears in religious and mystical traditions far removed from flood narratives, suggesting deep psychological significance. The vessel that preserves life through destruction becomes a metaphor for consciousness, surviving transitions between cosmic ages. This symbolic persistence indicates that flood memories touch on fundamental aspects of human experience and survival. Biological evidence supports massive die-offs corresponding to the proposed flood chronology. The Pleistocene extinction event eliminated numerous species of megafauna worldwide, with timing that aligns with the geological evidence for catastrophic flooding. The selective survival pattern suggests that catastrophe was rapid and global, rather than gradual regional extinctions. As we survey the evidence, geological, archaeological, mythological and biological, a picture emerges of planetary catastrophe on a scale that challenges comfortable assumptions about gradual change and uniform processes. The flood was not a localized event affecting a single people, but a global transformation that reset human civilization and left survivors traumatized by memories too terrible to forget. The waters that covered the world were not metaphorical, but literal, not mythical, but historical, recorded in stone and sediment and the deepest layers of human remembrance. From the reed marshes of ancient Sumer comes humanity's oldest written testimony of the Great Flood. The Epic of Gilgamesh, carved in cuneiform on tablets predating the biblical account by over a millennium, preserves the words of Utnapishtim, the Distant One, who survived when the gods decided to send a deluge. His account, remarkably detailed in its technical specifications, describes an ark built to precise mathematical ratios. Equal shall be her width and her length. But the Sumerian version is not the oldest. Deep in the archives of Nippur, archaeologists have uncovered the flood story of Ziusudra, which predates even Gilgamesh by centuries. Here, the flood is not divine caprice but cosmic necessity. A decision, a word of the assembly cannot be revoked. The gods themselves are portrayed as reluctant participants in a catastrophe that must unfold according to celestial law. This framing suggests not mythology but oral history passed down from witnesses who understood the flood as part of natural cycles rather than supernatural punishment. The consistency of technical details across cultures separated by continents and millennia suggests direct witness testimony rather than literary borrowing. The arc dimensions repeat with mathematical precision. 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high in Hebrew tradition, equivalent proportions in Babylonian accounts, similar ratios in flood narratives from India, Greece and the Americas. These are not poetic approximations, but engineering specifications preserved by people who had seen such vessels. In the Hindu Puranas, Manu receives warning of the coming deluge from Vishnu in his avatar as Matsya, the fish. The account includes specific instructions for survival. When the ocean overflows the continents, then you will see my immense form with horns. The Matsya Purana preserves details that parallel other flood accounts with uncanny precision. The gathering of seeds, the preservation of species, the grounding on a mountain peak when waters recede. The Platonic account of Deucalion and Pyrrha surviving the flood by building an ark parallels Middle Eastern narratives in structure and detail. Deucalion receives divine warning from his father Prometheus, builds a vessel according to specific instructions, and emerges after 9 days and nights to repopulate a cleansed earth. The Greek version includes details not found in other Mediterranean sources, such as the throwing of stones that become new humans, suggesting independent witness testimony rather than cultural diffusion. Chinese flood traditions preserved in the Shangshu and other classical texts describe Gun and Yu, the great battling floods that covered the known world. Unlike other traditions that frame the flood as divine punishment, Chinese accounts present it as a natural disaster requiring technological solutions. Yu's success in controlling the floods through engineering projects mirrors the practical survival strategies described in other flood narratives, suggesting that survivors combined preparation with active response to catastrophe. Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime stories preserve flood memories with geographical precision that demonstrates remarkable cultural continuity. The Bundjalung people of New South Wales tell of a time when the sea came up and covered all the lowland, forcing survivors to retreat to mountain tops. Archaeological evidence confirms that sea levels rose dramatically in Australian coastal areas at the end of the last ice age. validating the accuracy of oral traditions maintained for over 10,000 years. Native American flood traditions span the continent from the Arctic to the Amazon, each preserving unique details while maintaining core narrative elements. The Ojibwe tell of Nanabojo warning animals and humans to build rafts before waters covered the earth. The Hopi describe multiple world destructions, with the most recent flood survived by entering the underground realm of the Ant people. The specificity of these accounts, including descriptions of geological processes, animal behaviors, and survival strategies, suggests eyewitness origins rather than borrowed mythology. Mesoamerican codices preserve flood memories with calendrical precision that links the catastrophe to astronomical cycles. The Popol Vuh describes the destruction of previous world ages, with the most recent flood triggered by black resin falling from the sky. This detail finds echoes in impact theories for Younger Dryas initiation, where extraterrestrial objects created atmospheric disturbances that triggered climate catastrophe. The Andean flood traditions preserved by Inca historians describe Viracocha emerging from Lake Titicaca after the waters receded to recreate humanity. The account includes specific geographic details about land formations created by the flood and mentions technological knowledge preserved through the catastrophe. These traditions may preserve memories of actual post-flood settlement in the high Andes, where communities survived by adapting to new environmental conditions. Archaeological evidence increasingly supports the historical core of flood narratives. At Çatalhöyük in Turkey, excavations reveal settlement layers corresponding to flood chronologies, with evidence of rapid abandonment followed by new occupation patterns. Similar archaeological sequences appear at sites worldwide, suggesting coordinated response to global catastrophe rather than localized disasters. The technology preservation theme appears consistently across flood traditions, suggesting that survivors carried advanced knowledge from the pre-flood world. Sumerian accounts describe Utnapishtim receiving divine instruction in crafts and sciences. Hindu traditions tell of Manu preserving the Vedas through the flood. Greek accounts describe Deucalion and Pyrrha restoring civilization through retained knowledge. This pattern suggests that post-flood cultural development was not innovation, but restoration of previously existing capabilities. Genetic analysis of modern populations reveals bottleneck events that correspond to flood chronologies. Studies of mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome markers indicate severe population reductions approximately 12,000 years ago, followed by rapid expansion from limited founding populations. These genetic signatures align with flood narratives that describe small groups of survivors repopulating the Earth. Language family distributions provide additional evidence for post-flood dispersal patterns. The geographic spread of major language groups corresponds to migration routes described in flood traditions, suggesting that mythological accounts preserve accurate historical information about human movement after catastrophe. The timing of linguistic divergences, calculated through comparative methods, aligns with archaeological evidence for post-flood cultural expansion. The knowledge keeper traditions appear across cultures as specialized individuals or families responsible for preserving pre-flood wisdom. These figures, whether priests, shamans, or hereditary scholars, maintain technologies and practices that enabled rapid cultural recovery. The consistency of this role across different societies suggests that knowledge preservation was a deliberate survival strategy rather than accidental cultural transmission. Calendar systems worldwide preserve numerical relationships that appear to encode flood chronologies and predict future catastrophic cycles. The Maya long count begins at a creation date that corresponds to geological evidence for Younger Dryas termination. Hindu yugas describe cosmic cycles that align with astronomical periods associated with climate change. These systems suggest that flood survivors developed sophisticated understanding of the natural cycles that trigger periodic catastrophes. Post-flood settlement patterns described in mythological accounts align with archaeological evidence for human expansion after the last ice age. The movement from mountain refuges to river valleys, the establishment of agricultural communities, and the development of trade networks all correspond to patterns visible in the material record. This correlation suggests that flood myths preserve accurate historical information about early human adaptation to post-catastrophic environments. The universality of flood symbolism in religious and spiritual traditions indicates traumatic memory preserved at the species level. The ark becomes a symbol of preservation through transition, appearing in contexts far removed from flood narratives. This symbolic persistence suggests that the flood experience was sufficiently profound to become embedded in fundamental human psychology. Shamanic traditions worldwide include flood imagery in healing and initiation practices, suggesting that catastrophe survival became integrated into spiritual development systems. The flood journey appears as a metaphor for death and rebirth, with the survivor emerging transformed from the experience. This pattern indicates that flood memories influenced the development of consciousness practices designed to navigate personal and collective transformation. The climate data preserved in ice cores and sediment layers validates the chronologies preserved in flood traditions. Rapid climate transitions corresponding to mythological timeframes appear in the geological record with precision that confirms the historical basis of oral traditions. The correlation between mythological chronologies and scientific dating methods demonstrates the accuracy of cultural memory systems. As we examine the survivors' accounts from every corner of the earth, we see not random mythology or borrowed stories, but testimony, the voices of witnesses who lived through planetary catastrophe and preserved their experience in the most permanent medium available to them, human memory itself. These accounts, when examined collectively, reveal not just evidence of the Great Flood, but detailed information about how humanity survived, adapted, and rebuilt civilization from the ruins of the antediluvian world. The survivors remembered. They recorded their memories in stone and song, in ritual and story, in the very structure of language and the layout of their settlements. They preserved not just the fact of catastrophe, but the knowledge necessary to endure similar events in the future. Their accounts stand as humanity's first and most comprehensive disaster preparedness manual, written in the universal language of myth, but encoding practical wisdom about survival, renewal, and the cyclical nature of cosmic catastrophe. In the dialogue called Timaeus, Plato presents what he claims is not philosophy but history. Speaking through the character of Critias, he describes Egyptian priests at Sais who possessed records extending back 9,000 years before Solon's visit. "You Greeks are but children," they told the Athenian lawgiver. "You have no ancient opinion handed down by old tradition, nor any science that is hoary with age." The priest then proceeded to describe Atlantis, not as allegory or political metaphor, but as historical fact documented in their archives. Modern scholarship dismisses Plato's account as philosophical fiction, yet the internal consistency and technical detail suggest otherwise. The Atlantean civilization is described with the precision of an ethnographer's field notes. Concentric circular islands connected by bridges, a sophisticated agriculture system, advanced metallurgy including the mysterious orichalcum, and a naval empire that dominated the Mediterranean. Most tellingly, Plato provides specific dates, not in 600 BCE for Atlantis' destruction, that correspond closely to the end of the Younger Dryas period and the geological evidence for catastrophic flooding. The Egyptian connection deserves deeper consideration. The priests of Sais claim to possess stone records and temple inscriptions that preserved knowledge from before the Great Deluge. They spoke of Atlantis not as distant legend, but as a neighbouring power with whom Egypt had direct contact. The implication is staggering. If authentic, these records would represent continuous historical documentation stretching back over 11,000 years, making them the oldest preserved historical archives in human experience. The Edfu Temple texts, carved in hieroglyphs during the Ptolemaic period, preserve accounts that may represent these ancient records. They describe the first time, Zeptepi, when divine beings established civilization in Egypt, bringing knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, and monumental architecture. The texts speak of these founders not as gods, but as survivors from a destroyed homeland across the Western Sea, a description that aligns remarkably with Plato's account of Atlantean refugees. Geological evidence for Atlantis proves more compelling than typically acknowledged. The Azores Plateau in the Atlantic shows clear signs of recent submersion, with flat-topped seamounts that were once islands extending above sea level. Sediment analysis indicates these areas were exposed during the last ice age but submerged by post-glacial sea level rise. The timeline corresponds precisely to Plato's chronology for Atlantis' destruction. Marine archaeology in the Mediterranean continues to reveal evidence of sophisticated civilizations existing at depths that correspond to lower sea levels during the last ice age. The megalithic structures off Malta, the submerged cities near Alexandria, and the underwater ruins discovered near Cyprus all suggest that advanced civilizations thrived in areas now beneath the waves. These discoveries validate Plato's claim that advanced maritime civilizations existed during periods when sea levels were dramatically lower. The technology attributed to Atlantis in Plato's account includes capabilities that exceed acknowledged ancient achievements. The Atlanteans possessed flying vehicles, advanced metallurgy, and energy systems that drew power from crystals. While modern readers dismiss these as fantasy, similar technological descriptions appear in other ancient sources that appear to preserve pre-flood memories. The Vimanas described in Sanskrit epics like the Mahabharata and Ramayana present detailed technical specifications for aerial vehicles that parallel modern aerospace engineering principles. These texts include instructions for construction, operation, and maintenance of flying machines that used mercury-based propulsion systems. The mathematical precision of these descriptions, combined with their consistency across multiple sources, suggests preservation of actual technical knowledge rather than literary imagination. The Pacific traditions of Lemuria or Mu present another perspective on antediluvian civilization. Colonel James Churchward claimed to have translated ancient Knuckle tablets that described a vast continent in the Pacific Ocean, home to an advanced civilization that was destroyed by volcanic catastrophe. While Churchward's interpretations remain controversial, geological evidence for large land masses in the Pacific Basin during periods of lower sea level supports the possibility of substantial inhabited areas now submerged. Easter Island's Moai statues may represent remnants of this Pacific civilization. Recent underwater surveys around the island have revealed megalithic structures on the sea floor that suggest the island was once much larger, part of an extensive landmass that supported a substantial population. The sophistication of the Moai construction, combined with evidence of earlier occupation layers, suggests that Easter Island preserves only fragments of a much more extensive cultural complex. The Polynesian navigational traditions preserve memories of large land masses that existed in the Pacific but are now submerged. These oral histories include specific references to islands and continents that no longer exist, described with geographical detail that suggests direct knowledge rather than mythological invention. The accuracy of Polynesian navigation and their detailed knowledge of Pacific geography lends credibility to their accounts of vanished lands. Hyperborea, mentioned in Greek sources as a northern paradise beyond the reach of the north wind, may preserve memories of Arctic civilizations that existed during warmer climatic periods. Ancient authors describe Hyperborea as a land of perpetual spring inhabited by highly advanced peoples who possessed sophisticated astronomical knowledge. Geological evidence indicates that Arctic regions experienced temperate climates during various interglacial periods, potentially supporting the advanced civilizations described in classical sources. The sudden appearance of advanced technologies in the archaeological record suggests knowledge transfer from pre-existing civilizations rather than independent development. Agriculture, metallurgy, and monumental architecture appear simultaneously across multiple regions, approximately 10,000 years ago, without evident developmental phases. This pattern is consistent with diffusion from survivor populations carrying knowledge from destroyed civilizations. The megalithic building techniques that appear worldwide after the Younger Dryas period demonstrate capabilities that seem to represent preserved knowledge rather than new innovations. The precision-fitted stonework, the sophisticated engineering principles, and the astronomical alignments all suggest continuation of established traditions rather than experimental development. The global distribution of these techniques implies coordinated knowledge transfer from a common source. Antediluvian metallurgy presents evidence for advanced technologies that exceeded later historical capabilities. The Damascus steel of medieval Islamic smiths, renowned for its superior properties, was allegedly based on techniques preserved from antiquity. Similarly, certain bronze alloys found in ancient contexts cannot be reproduced with modern methods, suggesting lost knowledge of metallurgical processes. These examples imply that metalworking reached sophisticated levels before historical records began. Mathematical and astronomical knowledge encoded in ancient monuments exceeds the acknowledged capabilities of their builders. The Great Pyramid encodes the dimensions of the Earth, the distance to the Sun, and complex mathematical constants that weren't officially discovered until modern times. This precision suggests that the builders possessed comprehensive knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and geodesy that was later lost and only recently recovered. The antediluvian language connections may be preserved in linguistic substrata that underlie later language families. Certain root words appear across unrelated language groups with consistency that suggests common origin from a sophisticated parent language. These linguistic fossils may represent fragments of the high civilizations that existed before the Great Catastrophe and influenced all subsequent cultural development. Medical knowledge preserved in ancient texts includes surgical procedures, pharmaceutical preparations, and anatomical understanding that exceeded later historical periods. The Edwin Smith Papyrus describes surgical techniques that weren't matched until the modern era, while ancient Indian and Chinese medical texts preserve knowledge of circulation, anatomy, and treatment protocols that suggest systematic scientific investigation. This advanced medical knowledge implies sophisticated civilizations with institutional support for scientific research. The global flood myths consistently describe pre-flood civilizations as more advanced than post-flood survivors. As we examine the evidence for advanced pre-flood civilizations, we confront the possibility that human achievement has followed cyclical rather than linear patterns. The technological capabilities, the sophisticated knowledge systems, and the global reach of these vanished cultures suggest that we may not be the first to achieve high civilization on this planet. The masters who came before left traces of their presence in the foundations of later civilizations, in the precision of ancient monuments, and in the deepest layers of human cultural memory. Deep in a coal mine in Romania, in a stratum formed 60 million years ago, miners discovered an aluminum object shaped like the head of a hammer. Aluminum requires sophisticated electrolytic processes to extract from bauxite ore, processes that weren't developed until the 19th century. Yet here was a machined aluminum artifact embedded in geological layers that predate human civilization by tens of millions of years. The object now sits in the History Museum of Transylvania, labelled Origin Unknown. Such out-of-place artifacts challenge the linear progression model of technological development that underpins conventional history. In 1961, Wallace Lane, Virginia Maxey and Mike Mikesell discovered what appeared to be a spark plug encased in a geode near Olancha, California. The Kozo artifact, as it became known, was found in a mineral formation estimated to be 500,000 years old. X-ray examination revealed internal structures consistent with modern electrical components. Yet the artifact predates any known civilization capable of such manufacture. The Antikythera mechanism presents perhaps the most famous example of impossible ancient technology. Discovered in a Roman shipwreck dating to the 1st century BCE, the device contains gear trains of extraordinary complexity that accurately calculate the positions of celestial bodies. The mechanism includes features like differential gearing that weren't reinvented until the 16th century, and precision comparable to 18th century clockwork. Its existence proves that ancient Greeks possessed technological capabilities far exceeding what history books acknowledge. The Baghdad battery, discovered in 1936 by Wilhelm Koenig, consists of a clay jar containing a copper cylinder and iron rod that produces electrical current when filled with acidic solution. Dating to the Parthian period, 250 BCE to 224 CE, these devices suggest that electrical phenomena were understood and harnessed in antiquity. Similar galvanic cells have been found throughout the Middle East, indicating widespread knowledge of electrochemistry 2 millennia before conventional discovery. Precision machining appears in artifacts from various ancient cultures with accuracy that challenges accepted technological chronologies. The granite sarcophagi in the Serapeum at Saqqara show evidence of machine tooling with tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. The surfaces are ground to optical flatness and show tool marks consistent with high-speed rotary cutting instruments. Such precision requires advanced machinery operating under computer control, yet these artifacts predate known machine tool development by millennia. The Damascus steel phenomenon demonstrates metallurgical capabilities that exceeded later technological periods. Medieval Islamic smiths produced steel with properties that modern metallurgy struggles to replicate, creating blades that could cut through European swords and armor. The steel's unique characteristics derive from carbon nanotube structures visible only under electron microscopy. The knowledge of how to create these nanostructures was lost for centuries and only recently rediscovered through advanced materials science. Ancient concrete formulations demonstrate chemical knowledge that surpassed later capabilities. Roman concrete has proven more durable than modern Portland cement, retaining structural integrity after 2 millennia of exposure to seawater. Analysis reveals the use of volcanic ash additives and mixing ratios that create self-healing properties and extreme longevity. This knowledge was lost during the Dark Ages and has only recently been reverse-engineered by contemporary materials scientists. The precision optical work evident in ancient lenses and mirrors suggests sophisticated understanding of light physics. The Nimrud lens, discovered in the Palace of Sargon II and dating to the 8th century BCE, shows precision grinding and polishing that equals modern optical standards. Similar high-quality lenses have been found in Egyptian, Greek and Mayan contexts, indicating widespread knowledge of optics that history credits to much later periods. Surgical instruments and medical procedures described in ancient texts demonstrate anatomical knowledge and surgical capabilities that weren't matched until the modern era. The Edwin Smith Papyrus describes neurosurgical procedures, while ancient Indian texts detail cataract surgery, kidney stone removal, and plastic reconstructive techniques. Surgical instruments found in archaeological contexts show precision manufacturing and specialized designs that rival modern medical equipment. Chemical knowledge preserved in ancient texts includes pharmaceutical preparations, metal refining techniques, and synthetic material production that suggests systematic experimental investigation. The Papyrus Ebers contains over 800 medical prescriptions using sophisticated chemical compounds, while Chinese alchemical texts describe processes for creating synthetic materials. This knowledge implies institutional support for research and development activities that produced cumulative scientific advancement. Energy systems described in ancient sources include references to power generation and transmission methods that parallel modern electrical engineering principles. The Egyptian Dendera light reliefs appear to depict electrical illumination systems, while Mayan and other Mesoamerican cultures show evidence of electroplating and other electrical processes. These technologies suggest understanding of electromagnetic principles that weren't officially discovered until the modern era. Navigation technologies evident in ancient achievements exceed acknowledged capabilities of their time periods. Polynesian navigators crossed thousands of miles of open ocean with precision that rivals modern GPS systems, while ancient maps show geographical knowledge that predates known exploration. The Piri Reis map accurately depicts coastlines and land masses that weren't officially discovered for centuries, suggesting access to comprehensive geographical surveys. Astronomical calculation devices found in various ancient contexts demonstrate mathematical and observational capabilities that challenge conventional chronologies. The Nebra sky disk shows sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics, while structures like Stonehenge and Angkor Wat incorporate astronomical alignments of extraordinary precision. These achievements require sustained observation programs and mathematical modeling capabilities that imply institutional scientific development. Communication technologies may be preserved in ancient acoustic design and radio frequency applications. Megalithic sites worldwide show evidence of acoustic engineering that amplifies and focuses sound in ways that suggest systematic understanding of wave physics. Some researchers have detected radio frequency emissions from ancient sites that correlate with geological features, implying possible electromagnetic communication systems. Transportation systems described in ancient sources include vehicles and infrastructure that exceed acknowledged ancient capabilities. Roman road engineering achieved durability and precision that modern construction struggles to match, while descriptions of ancient vehicles suggest understanding of mechanical principles like hydraulic transmission and pneumatic systems. These technologies imply manufacturing capabilities and materials science that conventional history places in much later periods. Manufacturing evidence from ancient sites suggests mass production capabilities and quality control systems that parallel modern industrial practices. Standardized pottery, identical bronze weapons, and precision-fitted stone blocks indicate systematic production methods rather than craft-based individual creation. These patterns suggest organized industrial processes that produce consistent results across large geographical areas. The technological regression evident in many historical sequences suggests loss of knowledge rather than gradual development. Post-Roman European technology showed significant decline from classical achievements, while many ancient techniques were not recovered until the Renaissance or later. This pattern appears globally, indicating periodic loss and recovery of technological capabilities rather than steady advancement. Reverse engineering of ancient technologies continues to reveal sophisticated principles that challenge assumptions about primitive capabilities. Analysis of Greek fire reveals napalm-like properties that suggest advanced chemistry, while Damascus steel incorporation of carbon nanotubes demonstrates material science that exceeds medieval capabilities. Modern attempts to replicate ancient achievements often fail or require advanced contemporary technology to achieve similar results. The integration of multiple technological disciplines evident in ancient achievements suggests coordinated knowledge systems rather than isolated discoveries. Sites like Giza combine precision masonry, astronomical calculation, acoustic engineering, and hydraulic systems in coordinated designs that demonstrate systematic technical capability. Such integration requires institutional frameworks that support multiple specialized knowledge domains. As we survey the evidence for advanced ancient technology, we confront the possibility that human technological development has followed cyclical patterns rather than linear progression. The sophisticated capabilities evident in various ancient contexts suggest that high technology has appeared, flourished, and been lost multiple times throughout human history. The technological paradox forces us to reconsider assumptions about primitive capabilities and acknowledge that ancient peoples may have possessed knowledge and abilities that we are only beginning to recover. The silence is deafening. Across the ancient world, around 1200 BCE, the lights went out. Not metaphorically, but literally. The great civilizations that had dominated the eastern Mediterranean for over a millennium collapsed almost simultaneously, leaving behind ruined cities, abandoned trade networks, and cultural amnesia so complete that later Greeks called the subsequent period the Dark Age. This was not gradual decline but catastrophic erasure, a civilizational reset that scattered populations, destroyed libraries, and severed the threads connecting present to past. The Late Bronze Age collapse affected an area stretching from the Aegean to Mesopotamia, from the Black Sea to the borders of Egypt. The Mycenaean palaces of Greece were burned and abandoned. The Hittite Empire, which had rivaled Egypt in power, vanished so completely that its very existence was forgotten until archaeologists rediscovered it in the 19th century. Cities across the Levant were destroyed, often showing evidence of sudden, violent abandonment followed by centuries of sparse occupation. Linear B script, used for administrative records throughout the Mycenaean world, disappeared entirely. The knowledge of writing itself was lost in Greece for over 400 years, until the adoption of the Phoenician alphabet created what we now call Linear A. This represents one of the most dramatic examples of technological regression in recorded history. Entire populations forgetting how to read and write, transforming from literate civilizations to oral cultures almost overnight. The Sea Peoples appear in Egyptian records as mysterious raiders who devastated the established order throughout the eastern Mediterranean. The Egyptians provide detailed accounts of these invasions, but offer no clear identification of who these peoples were or where they originated. They seem to emerge from nowhere, destroy everything in their path, and then vanish from history as mysteriously as they appeared. Modern scholarship has failed to definitively identify their origins or explain their sudden disappearance. Archaeological evidence suggests the collapse was more than political or economic. It involved environmental catastrophe on a massive scale. Excavations reveal thick layers of destruction debris, often containing evidence of intense fires that burned at temperatures exceeding normal combustion. Some sites show signs of seismic activity, volcanic ash deposits, and other indicators of natural disasters that may have triggered or accompanied the civilizational collapse. The climate data from the period indicates severe environmental stress that would have undermined agricultural systems throughout the region. Tree ring analysis and ice core data reveal a period of cooling and drought that corresponds to the collapse chronology. Reduced rainfall would have diminished agricultural yields, weakened state resources, and forced populations to migrate in search of habitable territory. Yet environmental stress alone cannot account for the completeness of the cultural erasure. Knowledge systems that had been maintained for centuries vanished without trace. Complex technologies were abandoned and forgotten. Trade networks that had connected distant civilizations dissolved. The pattern suggests deliberate destruction or systematic removal of cultural continuity, rather than gradual decline due to external pressures. The survival strategies employed by remnant populations reveal the depth of the catastrophe. Groups that had previously lived in cities retreated to defensible hilltops, reverting to subsistence agriculture and local exchange systems. The archaeological record shows dramatic simplification in material culture. Elaborate pottery traditions reduced to crude handmade vessels, sophisticated metalworking replaced by basic tool production, monumental architecture abandoned in favor of simple shelters. Knowledge preservation appears to have become the responsibility of specialized groups who maintained oral traditions through the dark centuries. The bardic traditions that emerged in post-collapse societies served not only as entertainment, but as memory banks for historical, technical, and cultural information. The accuracy of these oral preservation systems is demonstrated by the fact that when writing resumed, many details of pre-collapse civilizations were accurately recorded despite centuries of illiteracy. Mystery schools and esoteric traditions may represent another survival mechanism for preserving advanced knowledge through periods of civilizational collapse. Groups like the Eleusinian Mysteries in Greece maintained initiation traditions that appear to preserve technical and scientific knowledge in symbolic form. These schools required secrecy not for mystical reasons, but as protection against the destruction that had claimed more visible institutions. The Phoenician merchant networks represent one of the few knowledge transmission systems that survived the Bronze Age collapse. Their trading ventures maintained contact between scattered populations and preserved technologies like alphabetic writing, navigation techniques, and metallurgical knowledge. The Phoenician colonies established throughout the Mediterranean served as repositories of civilizational knowledge that could be transmitted to recovering populations. Egyptian civilization's survival through the collapse period demonstrates the importance of geographical and institutional factors in preserving knowledge. Egypt's isolation from the main collapse zone, combined with its strong centralized institutions and extensive written records, allowed it to maintain cultural continuity through the catastrophic period. Egyptian texts from this era describe contact with refugees from destroyed civilizations, suggesting that Egypt served as a preserve for knowledge fleeing from devastated areas. The Library of Alexandria represents both the potential for knowledge preservation and the vulnerability of centralized information storage. Established during the Hellenistic period, the library attempted to collect and preserve the accumulated knowledge of the ancient world. Its gradual decline and eventual destruction demonstrate how easily vast repositories of information can be lost when institutional support fails or deliberate destruction occurs. Monastic preservation systems developed by various religious traditions proved more resilient than secular institutions. Christian monasteries in Europe, Islamic houses of learning in the Middle East, and Buddhist monasteries in Asia maintained manuscript copying traditions that preserved classical knowledge through successive periods of political instability. The redundancy built into these systems, with multiple copies distributed across different institutions, provided protection against localized destruction. Hidden continuity may exist in craft traditions and technical knowledge that survived the collapse through guild systems and family traditions. Metallurgical techniques, construction methods, and other practical knowledge were maintained by specialist groups who passed information through apprenticeship systems. These traditions often preserved ancient techniques in modified form, maintaining core knowledge while adapting to changed circumstances. Archaeological evidence suggests that some populations had advance warning of the coming collapse and took deliberate steps to preserve knowledge and resources. Hoards of valuable objects, careful burial of important artifacts, and the construction of hidden storage facilities all suggest preparation for extended periods of instability. These preservation efforts imply that at least some groups understood the scope of the approaching catastrophe and took steps to ensure survival of critical knowledge. The rebuilding process reveals how preserved knowledge was selectively reintroduced to recovering populations. Greek civilization's renaissance during the Archaic period incorporated elements from various sources. Egyptian knowledge preserved through trade contacts, Mesopotamian traditions maintained by survivor populations, and indigenous knowledge preserved through oral traditions. This synthetic approach created new civilizations that combined elements from multiple sources while developing novel adaptations to changed circumstances. Navigation knowledge preserved by maritime peoples demonstrates how specialized groups maintained advanced capabilities through the collapse period. Phoenician, Greek, and other seafaring peoples continued to develop navigation techniques, astronomical observation, and geographical knowledge even as land-based civilizations collapsed. Their mobility protected them from localized disasters, while allowing them to maintain contact with surviving knowledge centers. Calendar systems and astronomical knowledge show remarkable continuity through collapse periods, suggesting that certain types of technical knowledge were given priority for preservation. The ability to predict seasonal changes, calculate optimal times for agriculture, and maintain chronological records was essential for civilizational recovery. These systems were often encoded in religious or mythological frameworks that provided additional protection against loss. The role of women in knowledge preservation deserves particular attention, as they often maintain traditions that were lost in male-dominated institutions. Domestic crafts, medical knowledge, agricultural techniques, and cultural practices were frequently transmitted through female lineages that proved more resilient than formal institutional structures. These preservation systems operated below the level of official history but maintained essential knowledge through dark periods. Written record preservation strategies evolved to protect information against both accidental loss and deliberate destruction. Important texts were copied in multiple versions, hidden in secure locations, and encoded in formats that could survive periods when literacy was rare. Some knowledge was disguised as religious or literary material to avoid attracting the attention of those who might seek to destroy technical or historical information. As we examine the patterns of knowledge loss and preservation through the Bronze Age collapse and other catastrophic periods, we see both the fragility and resilience of human civilizational achievement. The Great Forgetting was not inevitable, but resulted from specific circumstances that overwhelmed the knowledge preservation systems of the time. Understanding these patterns provides insight into how advanced knowledge has been lost in the past and how it might be protected in future periods of instability. The survivors who maintained flickering flames of knowledge through the dark centuries demonstrate the crucial role of dedicated individuals and groups in preserving civilizational continuity. Their efforts ensured that the achievements of earlier ages were not entirely lost, but could be recovered and built upon when conditions again became favorable for cultural development. The Great Forgetting reminds us that progress is not inevitable, and that preserving knowledge requires constant vigilance against the forces of destruction that periodically overwhelm human societies. The precision of the correlation is startling. Across every continent, flood myths cluster around the same temporal horizon, approximately 12,800 years ago, marking the transition between the Younger Dryas stadial and the Holocene interglacial period. This is not the vague, long, long ago of typical folklore, but specific cultural memories that align with one of the most dramatic climatic transitions in Earth's recent history. The Younger Dryas began abruptly around 12,900 years ago, when global temperatures plummeted by 15 degrees Fahrenheit within decades, returning much of the northern hemisphere to near-glacial conditions. The name derives from the Dryas octopetala, an Arctic wildflower whose pollen appears in European sediment cores during this cold period, marking the southward advance of tundra conditions. What makes this climate event remarkable is not just its severity, but its sudden onset and equally rapid termination. Ice core data from Greenland reveals that the Younger Dryas ended as abruptly as it began, with temperatures rising 18 degrees Fahrenheit in just 50 years, a rate of change that dwarfs modern climate concerns. The isotope signatures in these cores show dramatic shifts in atmospheric circulation patterns, precipitation levels, and temperature gradients that indicate planetary-scale atmospheric reorganization. The meltwater pulse events recorded in coral reef terraces and marine sediments correspond precisely to the mythological chronology of global flooding. Meltwater pulse 1b, occurring around 11,500 years ago, raised global sea levels by approximately 80 feet within centuries. This catastrophic discharge of glacial meltwater created flooding on a scale that would have been perceived as world-ending by human populations living in coastal areas and river valleys. Lake Agassiz, a massive glacial lake that covered portions of Minnesota, Ontario, and Manitoba, contained more water than all current Great Lakes combined. When ice dams failed during Younger Dryas termination, the lake emptied into the North Atlantic with devastating consequences. The freshwater influx disrupted thermohaline circulation, triggering global climate reorganization that affected precipitation patterns worldwide. The scablands of eastern Washington provide a dramatic example of megaflood erosion power. When glacial Lake Missoula breached its ice dam, the resulting flood moved at 65 miles per hour, carrying house-sized boulders hundreds of miles. The erosional features carved by these floods, including the Grand Coulee, Palouse Falls, and the channeled scablands, demonstrate the landscape reshaping power of catastrophic water releases. Similar megaflood features appear on every continent, often in areas that mythological traditions identify as flood epicenters. The channeled scablands of Mongolia, the spillways of the Sahara, the vast erosional features of Siberia, and the submarine canyons off major continental margins all show evidence of water flows that exceeded normal riverine processes by orders of magnitude. The Randall Fosse in North Dakota reveals impact evidence that corresponds to Younger Dryas initiation. This massive scar, over 40 miles long, shows characteristics consistent with extraterrestrial impact during the late Pleistocene. Shocked quartz, microspherules, and other impact indicators found in sediment layers worldwide support the hypothesis that cosmic impact triggered the climate catastrophe preserved in flood myths. Nanodiamonds found in sediment layers corresponding to Younger Dryas onset provide additional evidence for extraterrestrial impact. These particles form only under extreme pressure conditions and appear in association with other impact indicators across multiple continents. The distribution pattern suggests either multiple simultaneous impacts or airburst events from a fragmented comet or asteroid. The iridium anomaly in sediment cores from this period parallels the signature found at the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary, indicating extraterrestrial material input to Earth's atmosphere. The concentration levels suggest significant cosmic debris influx that would have created atmospheric disturbances and climate effects consistent with mythological accounts of darkened skies and abnormal weather. Magnetic excursion events recorded in volcanic rocks and sediment cores correspond to the time frame preserved in cultural traditions. The Gothenburg magnetic excursion, occurring around 12,400 years ago, represents a period of dramatically weakened magnetic field strength that would have increased cosmic ray penetration and atmospheric ionization. These effects could have contributed to the climate instability and atmospheric phenomena described in flood myths. Volcanic activity indices show elevated levels during the Younger Dryas period, with major eruptions contributing to atmospheric loading and climate forcing. The Lake Sea eruption in Germany, dated to approximately 12,900 years ago, deposited ash across Europe and may have contributed to the climate deterioration that initiated the Younger Dryas stadial. Palynological evidence reveals dramatic vegetation changes that correspond to mythological descriptions of environmental transformation. Pollen records from across the northern hemisphere show rapid shifts from temperate forest species to cold-adapted flora, indicating ecosystem collapse and reorganization. These changes would have been catastrophic for human populations dependent on specific plant resources and hunting grounds. Speleothem records from caves worldwide preserve isotopic signatures that document rapid hydrological changes during the Younger Dryas transition. These formations record precipitation patterns, temperature fluctuations, and atmospheric composition changes with annual resolution. The data reveals periods of extreme weather variability that align with mythological accounts of chaotic climatic conditions. Ocean sediment cores contain evidence of massive iceberg discharges during Heinrich events that contributed to North Atlantic cooling and global climate reorganization. Heinrich Layer 80, corresponding to Younger Dryas initiation, shows evidence of catastrophic ice sheet collapse and meltwater discharge. The scale of these events would have created oceanic and atmospheric instability, sufficient to trigger the global catastrophe preserved in flood traditions. Raised beach deposits and marine terraces at elevations far above current sea levels indicate much higher ocean stands during post-glacial periods. These features, found on coastlines worldwide, mark shorelines that existed when vastly more water was in liquid form, rather than locked in continental ice sheets. The elevations correspond to the massive flooding described in mythological accounts. VARV sequences in glacial lake sediments provide annual resolution records of environmental conditions during the Younger Dryas period. These layered deposits show evidence of rapid environmental changes, including periods of extreme sediment input consistent with catastrophic erosion and landscape modification. The patterns document environmental instability that would have made survival challenging for human populations. Astronomical calculations reveal orbital and solar factors that may have contributed to late Pleistocene climate instability. Changes in Earth's obliquity, precession cycles, and solar output created boundary conditions that made the climate system vulnerable to triggering events. These background factors help explain why relatively minor perturbations could have initiated such dramatic climate transitions. Isotope analysis of human remains from late Pleistocene contexts shows dietary stress and population bottleneck signatures consistent with survival through catastrophic environmental conditions. Carbon and nitrogen isotope ratios indicate shifts toward more marginal food resources and evidence of nutritional stress. These signatures support mythological accounts of survival through periods of extreme hardship and resource scarcity. Archaeological site abandonment patterns reveal coordinated human responses to environmental catastrophe. Settlements throughout the Northern Hemisphere show evidence of sudden abandonment around 12,900 years ago, followed by reoccupation using different cultural patterns. This archaeological signature corresponds to the cultural disruption and population dispersal described in flood myths. Genetic bottleneck evidence in human populations indicates severe population reductions during the late Pleistocene that correspond to geological evidence for environmental catastrophe. Mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome studies reveal founder effects and reduced genetic diversity consistent with survival through population crashes. The timing of these bottlenecks aligns with both geological evidence and mythological chronologies. Megafaunal extinction patterns show coordinated species loss across multiple continents during the Younger Dryas period. The disappearance of mammoths, giant ground sloths, cave bears, and numerous other species created ecosystem reorganization that would have affected human populations. The extinction timing corresponds to mythological accounts of world-ending catastrophe that eliminated previous forms of life. As we examine the convergent evidence from geology, climatology, archaeology, and mythology, the alignment becomes impossible to ignore. The legends preserved in human cultural memory correspond with extraordinary precision to one of the most dramatic environmental transitions in recent Earth history. This correlation suggests that flood myths and related catastrophe traditions preserve accurate historical information about planetary-scale events that fundamentally altered the trajectory of human civilization. The implication is profound. Our ancestors were witnesses to and survivors of global catastrophe that modern science has only recently begun to understand through sophisticated analytical techniques. The mythological traditions that we have dismissed as primitive superstition may actually represent humanity's oldest and most accurate historical records. When the Hopi speak of the ant people who saved humanity by providing underground shelter during the destruction of the Second World, they describe beings with elongated skulls, large eyes adapted for darkness, and narrow waists characteristic of beings who lived without abundance. Half a world away, the Sumerian tablets describe the Anunnaki using remarkably similar physical characteristics and attribute to them the same role, preserving humanity through global catastrophe by providing refuge and knowledge. The linguistic connection proves even more startling. In Hopi language, Anu means ant and Naki means friend, creating Anunnaki, the same term used in Mesopotamian texts to describe the divine beings who guided human civilization. This is not cultural diffusion, but independent preservation of the same historical memory, each culture maintaining their piece of a larger narrative that spans continents and millennia. The mathematical constants encoded in megalithic monuments worldwide reveal sophisticated knowledge that transcends individual cultural achievement. The Great Pyramid incorporates pi, the golden ratio, and precise geodetic measurements that encode the dimensions of the Earth itself. At Angkor Wat, the same mathematical relationships appear in Khmer architecture separated by continents and centuries from Egyptian builders. The precision suggests not independent discovery, but preservation of common knowledge from a sophisticated source. Sacred geometry patterns repeat with mechanical consistency across cultures that supposedly never interacted. The Vesica Piscis appears in Christian iconography, Islamic architecture, Hindu temple design, and Celtic stone circles with identical proportional relationships. The Flower of Life pattern, consisting of multiple overlapping circles, manifests in Egyptian, Chinese, Japanese, and European contexts with perfect mathematical consistency. These are not coincidental aesthetic choices, but systematic application of geometric principles. Astronomical alignments in ancient monuments follow identical calculation methods, despite being separated by vast distances and time periods. Stonehenge, the Pyramid of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza, and the temples of Angkor all incorporate precession calculations that require centuries of sustained observation and mathematical modelling. The specific astronomical events tracked, solstices, equinoxes, and precession cycles, remain constant across cultures, suggesting shared understanding of celestial mechanics. Architectural proportions in megalithic sites worldwide follow the same modular relationships that appear in Gothic cathedrals, Islamic mosques, and Hindu temples. The ratio relationships between length, width, and height demonstrate knowledge of harmonic proportions that create both structural stability and acoustic resonance. These proportional systems appear fully developed without evolutionary phases, suggesting transmission of complete knowledge rather than gradual discovery. Metallurgical techniques show identical solutions to complex engineering problems across isolated civilizations. The lost wax casting method appears simultaneously in China, Egypt, and Peru without intermediate developmental stages. The knowledge of specific alloy compositions, heat treatment processes, and precision casting techniques appears complete upon first appearance, indicating knowledge transfer rather than independent innovation. Navigation methods preserved in Polynesian, Arab, and Norse traditions share identical principles, despite developing in different ocean systems. The use of wave pattern reading, stellar navigation, and environmental indicators follows the same systematic approaches across maritime cultures. The precision of these techniques, capable of crossing thousands of miles of open ocean with accuracy rivaling modern GPS, suggests derivation from sophisticated navigational knowledge. Medical procedures described in ancient Egyptian, Indian, and Chinese texts include identical surgical techniques and pharmaceutical preparations. Cataract surgery, trepanation procedures, and complex pharmaceutical compounding appear simultaneously across cultures using the same methodological approaches. The consistency of medical knowledge suggests systematic understanding of human anatomy and physiology that was preserved and transmitted across cultural boundaries. Language structure analysis reveals deep similarities in root words and grammatical constructions that suggest common linguistic origins. Proto-Indo-European reconstruction has identified root words that appear across language families from India to Ireland, while similar root structures appear in seemingly unrelated language groups worldwide. These linguistic fossils preserve traces of communication systems that predate known cultural contact. Flood chronologies preserved in mythological traditions show remarkable temporal consistency when converted to absolute dating systems. Hebrew, Sumerian, Hindu, and Mayan calendar systems all place major flood events at approximately the same time period, when their different chronological frameworks are synchronized. The precision of these dates suggests preservation of actual historical chronology rather than mythological approximation. Artistic motifs and symbolic systems demonstrate identical iconographic meanings across cultures separated by oceans and centuries. The spiral symbol carries identical meanings of life force and cosmic energy in Celtic, Native American, and Pacific Island cultures. Dragon symbolism appears with consistent attributes in Chinese, European, and Mesoamerican contexts, suggesting common mythological origins rather than independent symbolic development. Acoustic engineering principles appear in megalithic sites worldwide using identical techniques for sound amplification and resonance. The acoustic properties of Newgrange, Chichen Itza, and various Greek theatres follow the same engineering principles despite being built by different cultures in different time periods. The consistency suggests systematic understanding of acoustic physics rather than accidental discovery. Agricultural techniques show identical solutions to cultivation challenges across different climatic zones and geographical regions. Terraced agriculture, sophisticated irrigation systems, and crop rotation methods appear simultaneously in Peru, China, and the Mediterranean without evident developmental phases. The efficiency and sophistication of these systems suggest transmission of complete agricultural knowledge rather than gradual innovation. Calendar systems worldwide incorporate identical astronomical cycles and mathematical relationships, despite being developed by cultures with no historical contact. The Maya long count, Hindu yugas, and various European calendar systems all encode precession cycles, solar years, and lunar months using consistent mathematical relationships. This precision suggests systematic astronomical knowledge that was preserved across cultural boundaries. Construction techniques for moving and positioning massive stone blocks show identical engineering solutions across megalithic sites worldwide. The methods for quarrying, transporting, and precisely positioning stones weighing hundreds of tons demonstrate the same engineering principles from Easter Island to Baalbek. The consistency suggests systematic knowledge of physics and engineering rather than independent problem-solving. Energy systems described in ancient texts show remarkable consistency in their descriptions of power sources and transmission methods. References to crystal-based energy systems, electromagnetic phenomena, and advanced power generation appear across Egyptian, Hindu, and Mayan sources with consistent technical details. These descriptions suggest preservation of knowledge about energy technologies that exceed acknowledged ancient capabilities. Social organization patterns in advanced ancient civilizations show identical solutions to governance challenges. Council-based decision-making, knowledge preservation systems, and resource management techniques appear consistently across cultures that created lasting monuments and maintained social stability. The similarity of successful organizational models suggests transmission of governance knowledge from successful civilizations. Educational systems described in ancient sources show identical approaches to knowledge preservation and transmission. The use of oral tradition, symbolic encoding, and initiation systems appears consistently across cultures that maintained sophisticated knowledge over extended periods. These educational methods demonstrate systematic understanding of how to preserve and transmit complex information across generations. Technological integration evident in ancient monuments shows identical solutions to complex engineering challenges. The coordination of structural, acoustic, astronomical, and hydraulic systems within single monuments demonstrates the same systematic approach across different cultures and time periods. This integration suggests common engineering knowledge rather than independent technological development. The pattern recognition analysis reveals that humanity has preserved fragments of sophisticated knowledge systems that once existed as coherent wholes. The mathematical constants, the engineering principles, the astronomical knowledge, and the technological capabilities all point toward common sources that possessed comprehensive understanding of natural laws and their practical applications. These patterns suggest that advanced knowledge has been transmitted across cultural boundaries through methods that have preserved core principles while allowing for cultural adaptation. The consistency of fundamental relationships, mathematical, astronomical, and engineering, combined with variation in surface cultural expressions, indicates systematic preservation of technical knowledge through traditional cultural frameworks. The implications challenge linear progression models of human development and suggest instead cyclical patterns where knowledge systems rise, face catastrophic disruption, and are preserved through cultural transmission until conditions allow their reintegration into functioning civilizations. The pattern recognition reveals that we may be engaged in recovery of ancient knowledge rather than creation of entirely new understanding. If the evidence presented in these investigations proves authentic, then human history requires fundamental revision on a scale that would dwarf the Copernican revolution. We are not looking at minor adjustments to established chronologies or the addition of previously unknown civilizations to existing timelines. We are confronting the possibility that the entire narrative of human development, the rise from primitive hunter-gatherers to complex civilizations, represents only the recovery phase following global catastrophe that destroyed far more sophisticated predecessors. The academic resistance to such revision is understandable but ultimately counterproductive. Entire disciplines have been built upon assumptions of linear technological progression, gradual social complexity development, and the primacy of recorded history over mythological accounts. Archaeological careers are based on expertise in specific time periods and cultural sequences that would require complete restructuring if advanced pre-flood civilizations proved real. The institutional momentum of established scholarship creates enormous resistance to paradigm shifts that would invalidate decades of specialized research, yet the evidence continues to accumulate faster than traditional explanations can accommodate it. Each new megalithic discovery, each impossible artifact, each confirmation of mythological accuracy in previously unknown details adds pressure to a theoretical framework that grows increasingly strained. The orthodox chronology requires ever more complex explanations to account for anomalies that would be easily explained by acknowledging advanced antediluvian civilizations. The technological implications alone demand historical revision. If ancient civilizations possessed advanced metallurgy, precision manufacturing, electromagnetic knowledge, and sophisticated energy systems, then our understanding of technological development changes fundamentally. Instead of gradual accumulation of knowledge over millennia, we see catastrophic loss followed by slow recovery, with modern achievements representing rediscovery rather than innovation. This revised model explains otherwise puzzling patterns in the historical record. The sudden appearance of complex technologies without evident developmental phases, the sophisticated knowledge evident in ancient monuments, and the technological regression evident in many historical sequences all make sense within a recovery paradigm. Humanity has been climbing back toward capabilities that were once commonplace rather than pioneering entirely new territories of knowledge. The social organization implications prove equally significant. Advanced ancient civilizations appear to have achieved stability and continuity that modern societies have not matched. If Atlantis endured for thousands of years, if Agartha has maintained itself through multiple surface civilization cycles, then our models of social development require fundamental revision. The progression from simple to complex societies may not represent advancement, but adaptation to post-catastrophic conditions that require different survival strategies. Educational systems would need complete restructuring to accommodate revised historical understanding. Current curricula present human development as steady progress from primitive beginnings toward modern sophistication. A cyclical model that acknowledges advanced predecessors would require teaching historical patterns of rise, catastrophe, preservation, and recovery, rather than simple linear advancement. Archaeological methodology would require modification to accommodate evidence that challenges established chronologies. Current dating methods and interpretive frameworks are designed to fit evidence into predetermined timelines that assume technological limitations for ancient peoples. Acknowledging advanced ancient capabilities would require developing new analytical approaches that can recognize sophisticated technologies even when they employ different principles than modern implementations. The geological implications extend beyond archaeology into earth sciences themselves. If catastrophic events have repeatedly reset human civilization, then our understanding of geological uniformitarianism requires modification to accommodate periodic catastrophism. The rates of change evident in the geological record may reflect rapid transformation periods rather than gradual processes extending over vast timescales. Scientific paradigms would face pressure for revision across multiple disciplines. Physics might need to acknowledge energy systems that operate through principles not yet understood by conventional theory. Materials science might need to investigate manufacturing techniques that produced capabilities we cannot currently replicate. Atmospheric and climate sciences might need to model rapid transitions that exceed current theoretical frameworks. The chronological revision would affect religious and philosophical understanding as well. Many spiritual traditions preserve accounts of golden ages, advanced predecessors, and cyclical time that align with the evidence for sophisticated antediluvian civilizations. Acknowledging the historical accuracy of these accounts would require re-evaluating the relationship between mythological and scientific knowledge systems. International cooperation would become essential for investigating evidence that spans multiple continents and cultural traditions. No single nation or academic institution possesses sufficient resources to investigate the full scope of advanced ancient civilization evidence. Collaborative research programs would need to coordinate across traditional disciplinary and national boundaries to develop comprehensive understanding of revised historical chronologies. The resistance to chronological revision reflects deeper issues about human adaptability to paradigm change. Thomas Kuhn's analysis of scientific revolutions demonstrates that established paradigms persist, despite accumulating anomalies, until alternative frameworks provide better explanatory power. The evidence for advanced ancient civilizations may have reached the threshold where new paradigms become necessary regardless of institutional resistance. Economic implications would follow from acknowledging that humanity has achieved high civilization before and lost it through catastrophic events. Investment in catastrophe-resistant knowledge preservation systems would become priorities for maintaining civilizational continuities. Technologies and social systems would need evaluation for their resilience during periods of global instability. The timeline revision would affect legal and political systems that depend on historical precedent for legitimacy. If current nation-states represent recent formations following civilizational recovery rather than natural evolutionary development, then claims based on historical occupation and cultural precedents would require re-evaluation. Indigenous peoples' claims of ancient knowledge and territorial relationships would gain additional weight. Cultural identity concepts would face challenges as established ethnic and national narratives proved incomplete or inaccurate. If advanced ancient civilizations were globally distributed with sophisticated transportation and communication networks, then concepts of isolated cultural development would require revision. Human cultural diversity might represent adaptation to post-catastrophic conditions rather than independent evolutionary development. As we confront the implications of rewriting the timeline, we face a choice between protecting comfortable assumptions and embracing evidence that challenges our understanding of human capabilities and historical development. The revision required goes beyond adding new facts to existing frameworks. It requires fundamental reconceptualization of what it means to be human, what we are capable of achieving, and how our achievements relate to those of our predecessors. The timeline revision offers both humility about our own limitations and hope about human potential, based on evidence that we have reached great heights before and can do so again. The recognition that advanced civilizations have risen and fallen before us carries both profound warning and extraordinary hope. If the evidence for sophisticated antediluvian cultures proves accurate, if giants once walked the earth and built wonders we can barely comprehend, if floodwaters genuinely covered the world and destroyed civilizations more advanced than our own, then we are not unique pioneers pushing into unexplored territory. We are survivors of a species that has achieved greatness before and lost it to cosmic cycles that operate on scales larger than human political and economic planning. The cyclical catastrophe implications demand immediate attention. If the geological and mythological evidence accurately preserves records of periodic global catastrophes triggered by cosmic events, climate transitions, or magnetic field disruptions, then our civilization faces similar risks. The 12,000-year cycle suggested by various ancient calendar systems may represent real periodicity in catastrophic events, rather than mythological symbolism. Understanding these cycles becomes essential for species survival. Modern technology offers both protection and vulnerability compared to ancient approaches. Our satellite communication systems, global transportation networks, and electronic data storage provide unprecedented coordination capabilities, but create single points of failure that could collapse entire civilizations. Ancient knowledge preservation systems based on stone monuments, oral traditions, and distributed storage proved more resilient than our current dependence on fragile electronic infrastructure. The knowledge preservation challenge becomes critical when viewed through the lens of civilizational cycles. Ancient peoples embedded essential information in myths, monuments, and cultural practices that survived catastrophic periods when written records and formal institutions were destroyed. Our current knowledge storage systems, concentrated in digital formats and centralized institutions, may prove inadequate for preserving essential information through major catastrophic events. Climate adaptation strategies employed by ancient civilizations offer models for responding to rapid environmental change. The evidence suggests that successful ancient cultures developed flexible agricultural systems, dispersed resource storage, and social organizations capable of rapid relocation when environmental conditions changed. These adaptation strategies may prove more relevant than technological solutions for surviving future climate transitions. Social organization patterns that enabled ancient civilizations to maintain stability over millennia contrast sharply with modern short-term political and economic cycles. Successful ancient cultures appear to have developed governance systems based on long-term stewardship rather than short-term advantage extraction. These organizational models may offer guidance for creating institutions capable of maintaining social cohesion through extended periods of environmental and economic stress. The relationship between technological capability and civilizational resilience reveals complex trade-offs that modern society has not adequately addressed. Advanced ancient civilizations appear to have possessed sophisticated technologies while maintaining sustainable relationships with their environments. Our current technological trajectory, based on resource extraction and waste production, may prove less stable than ancient approaches that achieved high capability within ecological limits. Human potential takes on new dimensions when viewed against evidence of ancient achievements. If our predecessors possessed knowledge and capabilities that we are only beginning to recover, then current human limitations may reflect temporary conditions rather than permanent constraints. The evidence suggests that humans are capable of much greater achievements than modern industrial civilization has demonstrated. Educational priorities require revision to prepare for civilizational challenges that operate on longer timescales than current planning horizons. Ancient knowledge preservation systems maintained essential information across centuries of cultural disruption through specialized training programs that created human repositories of critical knowledge. Modern education systems focused on industrial specialization may prove inadequate for maintaining civilizational continuity through major transition periods. Spiritual and philosophical implications emerge from recognizing humanity's cyclical relationship with advanced achievement and catastrophic loss. Many traditional wisdom systems preserve teachings about impermanence, cyclical time, and the importance of maintaining balance with natural forces. These perspectives, often dismissed as primitive superstition, may represent sophisticated understanding of cosmic patterns that affect civilizational development. Resource allocation strategies need reconsideration if our civilization faces similar risks to those that destroyed advanced predecessors. Current economic models based on continuous growth and resource consumption may prove suicidal when viewed against evidence that previous high civilizations collapsed due to environmental overreach. Ancient models based on steady-state resource cycling may offer more sustainable approaches to maintaining advanced capabilities. Scientific research priorities should shift toward understanding the cosmic and geological cycles that appear to trigger periodic catastrophes. If ancient calendar systems accurately encode knowledge about celestial mechanics that affect Earth's environmental stability, then research into these cycles becomes essential for species survival. The integration of astronomical, geological, and mythological research may reveal patterns that conventional academic specialization has missed. International cooperation becomes essential when catastrophic risks operate on global scales that transcend national boundaries. Ancient flood accounts suggest that survival required coordinated response across multiple populations and geographical regions. Modern civilization's division into competing nation-states may prove inadequate for addressing challenges that require species-level coordination. Technology development should prioritize resilience and distribution rather than centralization and efficiency. Ancient civilizations appear to have maintained sophisticated capabilities through distributed knowledge systems and robust infrastructure that could function independently when centralized coordination failed. Modern technology development focused on network efficiency and centralized control creates vulnerabilities that may prove catastrophic during major disruption events. Cultural preservation efforts should expand beyond protecting current diversity to recovering ancient knowledge systems that enabled long-term civilizational stability. Indigenous traditions worldwide preserve fragments of sophisticated understanding about sustainable living, cyclical time, and natural law that may prove essential for navigating future challenges. These knowledge systems deserve protection and study rather than dismissal as primitive mythology. Personal preparation strategies should incorporate lessons from ancient survival accounts. The flood narratives consistently emphasize the importance of advanced warning systems, stored resources, and social networks that can provide mutual support during catastrophic periods. Individual preparation for catastrophic events should combine modern technological capabilities with proven traditional survival strategies. The long view becomes essential for making decisions that affect species survival rather than merely individual or generational advantage. Ancient civilizations that achieve stability over millennia appear to have developed decision-making processes that considered consequences across multiple generations. Modern short-term planning horizons may prove inadequate for avoiding the mistakes that led to previous civilizational collapses. Hope emerges from evidence that humans have not only survived previous catastrophes, but emerged from them to build new civilizations that preserved and advanced essential knowledge. The pattern suggests resilience and adaptability that exceeds what modern pessimistic assessments of human nature would predict. If we have done it before, we can do it again, potentially achieving even greater heights by learning from previous mistakes. The implications for our current moment demand both humility and action. Humility because the evidence suggests that we are not the first to achieve advanced civilization and may not avoid the mistakes that destroyed our predecessors. Action because the knowledge preserved in ancient sources offers guidance for creating more resilient and sustainable approaches to maintaining human civilization through whatever challenges await. We stand at a crucial juncture where the choice between repeating ancient mistakes and learning from ancient wisdom will determine whether our civilization joins the vanished masters or surpasses them. As we return from this journey through stone and story, through the whispered accounts of giants and the geological signatures of global floods, we find ourselves standing in the same physical world, but seeing it with transformed eyes. The familiar landscapes around us no longer seem quite so permanent, the achievements of our civilization no longer quite so unprecedented, the boundary between myth and history no longer quite so clear. In the precision-fitted stones of Peru, we have glimpsed evidence of capabilities that challenge every assumption about technological progression. In the flood narratives preserved across every continent, we have heard the testimony of survivors who witnessed planetary catastrophe on a scale that makes modern disasters seem like local disturbances. In the archaeological anomalies dismissed by mainstream scholarship, we have seen fragments of a larger story that refuses to remain buried. The weight of evidence presses against comfortable assumptions about linear progress and human uniqueness. We may not be the first to reach such heights of achievement. We may not be immune to the cosmic cycles that have periodically reset human civilization. We may be walking in footsteps that were carved millennia ago by beings whose names we have forgotten, but whose works still tower above our own. Yet if this investigation has revealed our limitations, it has also revealed our potential. The same species that survived global catastrophe and preserved essential knowledge through dark ages of forgetting has also produced the monuments that still inspire wonder, the technologies that still confound explanation, and the oral traditions that still carry truth across thousands of years. We are the descendants of giants, inheritors of their resilience if not their stature. The ancient calendar systems that encoded cycles of catastrophe and renewal suggest that we stand again at a crucial juncture. The same periodicity that brought floods and fire to previous civilizations approaches once more, but this time we face it with awareness that our predecessors lacked, the recognition that such events are not random acts of divine wrath, but predictable patterns woven into the fabric of cosmic time. The question becomes not whether we can avoid the cycles that have shaped all previous human history, but whether we can learn to navigate them with greater wisdom than those who came before. The vanished masters left us more than ruins and riddles. They left us roadmaps encoded in mythology, engineering principles preserved in stone, and survival strategies embedded in the deepest layers of cultural memory. Perhaps the greatest discovery emerging from this investigation is not the evidence for ancient achievements, but the recognition that such achievements remain within human reach. The builders of the impossible stones, the survivors of the world-ending floods, the preservers of essential knowledge through centuries of darkness. They were human as we are human. If they could achieve such wonders, so can we. If they could survive such catastrophes, so can we. If they could preserve what matters most through the collapse of everything that seemed permanent, so can we. The giants, floods, and lost civilizations are not separate from our story. They are chapters in the same story, and we hold the pen for writing what comes next. In this recognition lies both responsibility and hope. We write not just our own future, but the next chapter in humanity's long dialogue with the cosmos. Whether that chapter records another fall, or the first successful navigation of the ancient cycles, depends on choices we make in the present moment, guided by wisdom preserved from the deepest past and aimed toward a future worthy of all who came before. The evidence surrounds us, written in stone and preserved in the deepest human memories. Whether you see it as history or mystery, fact or folklore, these stories shape how we understand our place in the long arc of time. Share your thoughts, your own encounters with the unexplained, your theories about what lies hidden in our past. Until we meet again in the spaces between what we know and what we wonder, welcome to Historic Sleep.